So I think the majority of us are here. We might get some latecomers, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, welcome. Welcome to Careers That Invest in Our Planet, an event under the Sustainable Futures Project, which we are running to celebrate Earth Day this month. Did you know this is the 54th Earth Day, and each year there's a different theme. And this year the theme is Planet versus Plastics. So today we'll be talking about how we can be a plastic-free planet. And not just that, you'll be meeting some really inspiring role models who will share their insights and experiences on what it means to be investors of our planet. They'll take you around their sustainability world and talk about their career journey with you all. So to the audience, please ensure your audio and your video is turned off. If you have any questions at any point of the session, feel free to ask them using the chat function. And just a reminder, we are recording the session. It will be featured on the FRS platform and our YouTube channel and various other social media platforms. So we are really excited to welcome our guest speakers from the field of sustainability. Today joining us, we will be having soon, coming along, Sunny Sekon, the founder of Defy Brands. We have Alex, proposal manager at JLL, and Georgina Chillingworth, the senior surveyor at JLL. So without further ado, we're going to go straight into our career talks, and I'm going to give the floor to the speakers. So we're going to go straight over to Alex, if that's all right. So Alex, would you like to kick off and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do, how you got there, how your job and your company help to preserve the planet, and everything else that we want to hear about. So yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Hi everybody, so I'm Alex Iverson and I'm a proposal manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa. My specific focus on data centres, that includes construction projects, facilities management and technology related to data centres as well. So I do have some slides to share, but I think Alison is going to share those for me now. So hopefully they come up on your screen and you can see them. Give me a thumbs up, someone, if they're up.
Just waiting now. It can take a second. So
no worries.
Something's happening. So yes, we can see that.
So just yeah, that's me on the screen. With not my dog, unfortunately. It's a very cute dog. A little bit about me. So I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I've got my own dog, not that one, and a cat. But I'm definitely more of a dog person. Just don't tell the cat. I love to travel, go to gigs, hike, camp and wild swim, and I'm lucky enough to live in the Lake District. So I work virtually, remotely for JLL. So if you go to slide 3 for me, Alison.
Just blank screen there.
Oh, if you click a button.
Yeah, just give me a second. It's being really, really slow.
No
Sorry,
worries.
I'll let me stop sharing and try it again. We're not having much luck today, right? Let me try it.
Technology is not really on our side today. It could be a memory test, Alex. We could see how much you remember from what you've prepared. Nope, still a blank screen.
Well, I was going to say, in my career, I've been lucky to work with some really good clients and contribute to some really exciting projects. You might recognise some of the logos that hopefully come up at some point on the screen.
Yeah, you can see them now.
Brilliant. So they're some of the companies that I've working on projects with. Some pretty big names up there like Google, lots of things for the NHS. Manchester United Football Club, who unfortunately didn't give me a season ticket, which was a bit of a bummer, but you know. So I started off working in my career as a receptionist, and I started working for a company called Cerner, who were based out of the US but had a London office, and they created healthcare technology. From there I went to becoming a PA and started supporting the communications teams. And I would go around the office on quiet days and start saying to people, like, is there anything I can help with? I've got nothing to do. Can you give me something to do? And that's how I moved into proposals. From there, I went and worked at Advanced Health and Care as a proposal manager. They also created healthcare technology, specifically for hospitals and care homes. Took a break from the healthcare technology sector and moved into the legal tech sector. So I went and worked for a company called Epic. I worked in their e-discovery team. So e-discovery is, if you don't know what it is, it's the technology that the courts use during court cases. It's a way to retrieve data, images, any kind of information from devices such as phones, laptops, and things sent over the internet. And they use that in court cases as evidence. So I learned there that everything that you send online can be tracked down at a later date, even if you delete it, just something to be mindful of. And then I moved into Big Hand as a senior bid manager. That was also legal technology. So again, most of my career has been in a technology sector, kind of STEM career, which is interesting because I really didn't like science or technology at school. I'm not sure how I kind of fell into this space, to be honest. And then I joined JLL 3 years ago now, just under 3 years ago now. Again, I went into technology proposals in our technology sector, and now I've moved across into proposals and I support the data centre team, like I said, in the construction, projects and facilities management field. So I think if we go to the next one. So when I say I'm a proposals manager, most people imagine some kind of marriage proposal. It's obviously not that. A proposal is essentially when companies want to buy something, they do what we call going out to market. They advertise what they're looking for, a particular product or service. And when they do, other businesses will respond with a written document called a proposal or bid. So my job is to write that winning bid so that the company that I work for gets picked. So now I'm writing those proposals for the data centre team. I've been doing that for about 6 months now, and I've found a real passion and interest in the data centre sector, and that's kind of where my focus is going to be for the future of my career. So data centres, what are they and why are they important? I'll give you a really high level dummies guide because that's basically the level of my knowledge at the moment. But they're basically huge warehouse buildings where we house the computers, the cloud that we use to run our online systems globally. So anytime you're using the internet, you're using a data center. They're where all of our data, photographs, music, and everything else is stored. So as we kind of go forward, our reliance on technology is deepening, particularly with AI and all the other infrastructure we have running online. Data centers are becoming more and more important. That means that they need to run 24/7, 365 days a year and across the world. They need to be really reliable. And so to make sure that they're really reliable, we're using a combination of things, generators, maintenance, safe locations, network security, obviously skilled people and specialist cooling systems to ensure that they stay online at all times. So the part of my job is to make sure that we're getting across JLL's expertise in that field and making sure that data center companies do business with us, either to build their data centers or to run them safely. So that data centers, they take up a lot of power. And on the next slide, I think got a sustainability bit there. All of that comes at a huge cost to the environment. They're really data intensive, really energy intensive. They use a lot of power to run and a lot of power to keep them cool. So various estimates have placed data centers accounting for 2% of the world's energy consumption at the moment. That's roughly equivalent to the aviation industry. To put that into perspective, there are about 100,000 planes a day taken off globally. So that's a huge impact on the environment. And 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but actually that is a really massive impact. So it's really, really important that when data centers are built and the way that we run them is done in sustainable ways. So a lot of that can be achieved through looking at alternative sources of power, such as wind generation, solar power, using water to keep like natural resources like water to keep them cool, things like that. But it's we're kind of fighting a bit of a battle on that front because doing that comes at a cost, and it's already a really expensive sector. It's already very expensive to build these data centers because of their size, and it's really expensive to run them because you do need specialist people to actually run them day to day and maintain them. So we're working on that. For JLL, we're really focusing on sustainability when it comes to data centers because we are aware that what we do it does have an effect on the environment, and we're really keen to make sure that we're doing that in as much of a positive way as possible, whilst understanding that actually data centers are the future. We have to embrace that, but we want to do it in the best way possible for the people on the planet. So we have a huge focus on sustainability. We're making sure that we develop the right processes, technology, and working with our clients to run the data centers in the most energy efficient ways possible. We're doing lots of projects for that in the area as well, and I will share some materials that can be shared out about sustainability in data centers specifically, and what we're doing as a company to help with that. So on top of that, I think the next slide, if you don't mind, there are other issues, not just sustainability in the data center sector, and a big one is that more than 50% of all data center workers are set to retire in the next few years. So that means that we're going to have a huge skills shortage. There's going to be a massive gap between how many people we have who can actually do the work and how many people we need. So data centers, they're growing, the demand for them is growing, and we just don't have the workforce or the skills to actually support that growth. They're also, for me personally, it's a big issue. There aren't as many women in the in the sector as there could be. Something like less than 2% of all the workforce globally in data centers, from senior management all the way down to the people who are doing the everyday maintenance and cleaning, are actually women across the globe. So that's, for me, that's just not good enough. And so that's something that we're also focusing on as an aside from the sustainability piece. On the next slide, I've put out some other issues that aren't specific to data centers, but actually go across many industries. But given that data centers is a STEM sector, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, etc., these are more prevalent in that sector, in STEM sectors than others. So the gender pay gap, globally, women are earning 10% less than men, and that pay gap only widens as they age. It's actually higher in data centers because of how few women there are. Social mobility, so when you're born into a family on a low income, you're less likely to have the same opportunities, despite being talented, skilled, or determined. Access to education, which again, sector-wide, but actually really affects data centers because we do need those skilled workers, and we're losing them quite rapidly. Access to specialist jobs and male-dominated cultures. Like I said, there's less women in data centers, so it is a male-dominated culture. STEM fields in general are the same, and unfortunately, because fewer women study and work in those fields, they tend to perpetuate that male-dominated culture, which isn't as supportive or attractive to women or minorities. That's, again, these are all things that JLL are focusing on, but are also a big focus for the industry, the wider industry. So the next slide, what kind of roles are there in data centers? I'm not an engineer, I don't have a degree or a trade, but I'm finding that there are lots of opportunities for me to move into this sector and make an impact. So things like building and managing critical infrastructure, data centers, gas, oil, all those kind of things that we use around the world. But project managers, electricians, technical roles, data roles, right through to architects, builders, salespeople to actually, do the work in the offices like we do. There are loads of avenues into data centers and lots of career paths to choose from within the sector as well. Depending on what kind of role you would go into, you might need different types of skills. So you can need hard skills such as mechanical engineering, and they're quite specific. And then on the next slide, I've just put in a few soft skills that have definitely helped me in my career. So communication, being able to communicate, speak up, build relationships, talk to people from all different levels across all different kinds of businesses. Teamwork, having that mentality that we're all in it to succeed and we're going to work together, particularly when it comes to trying to launch things like these sustainable initiatives. You want to get everybody on the same page and working towards a unified goal. So a positive mental attitude. Life can be tough. Let's not make it tougher for people. I think if you, there's a saying like, work hard and be nice to people, and that's kind of what I try and live by. We spend so much time at work. We want to have a positive experience at work. So having that kind of mental attitude really helps. Organisation, just being organised, tracking our tasks, making sure that we're all aligned and reaching our goals, and keeping audit trails, things like that. Creativity, thinking up ideas, having fun, bringing more of a playful energy to the tasks that we have to do, and a passion, just an overall passion for life, for learning, and embracing new opportunities. So that's kind of an overview of the skill sets that you would need, not just for data centers or sustainability, but I think those skills would help you in every career going forward. I think that's pretty much me. I've got a next slide that says what's next. So I think the sky is really the limit. There's so much growth in the sector. It's a huge opportunity for people who are interested in sustainability to come in and make a real difference, not just on an individual level, but actually globally, and really work and see what we can do to make sure that our future technology is sustainable. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you do want to add me on LinkedIn or anything like that, I'm happy to keep people updated about opportunities for mentorship and the different programs that JLL are doing to encourage people into STEM.
Thank you so much, Alex. Wow, there's a lot there. There's a lot to.
It was, sorry, I've kind of thrown it all
No,
at you.
that's amazing. No, in such a short amount of time, you've managed to. Hi, Sunny. You managed to just cram in so much, and that was really inspiring. So, just a couple of things that I want to touch on before we move over to Georgina, and then we'll go over to Sunny. So you mentioned a bunch of soft skills like communication, creativity, teamwork. Now, I think soft skills, like, it's such a great, we need to talk about it more, really. How can young people who haven't had very much work experience, how can they start developing some of those crucial skills within school life? Any tips?
I think the big one for me has always been communication, and you get that at school anyway because you're talking to your friends, you're talking to teachers, so you get used to talking to different people that come from different backgrounds. School is actually a perfect opportunity to do that. It's such a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds, so I think that's really important. But actually, just having a bit of confidence to put yourself out there. It can be really difficult to start up conversations with strangers. It can be really intimidating, but actually just practice. That's the main thing. I'm that person that sits next to somebody on a bus, and by the time we've got to the end of the journey, I know everything about them, and that's just my natural way, my natural personality. And I appreciate it's not that simple for everybody, but the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And I think that's just the main one.
Brilliant. So to the audience at home, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. We'll be coming back to the questions at the end, towards the end of the session. So thank you, Alex. We're going to pause, but we will bring you back into the conversation. We're going to move over to Georgina. Georgina, same questions for you. Thank you so much for being here. What do you do at JLL? And we know you're a senior surveyor, but what does that mean to the audience at home and at school? They may be sat there thinking, what does that actually mean? What does the day look like for you? How did you get to where you are? And how does your role help preserve the planet?
Thank you. I'll just share my slides. It will help me answer all those questions. Let me know when you can see them. Can you see that?
Can see that. Yes.
Perfect. So kind of a background to how I got to JLL and senior surveyor now is I, after school, went to university to Oxford Brookes and actually did a real estate management undergraduate degree, and you can do this, which is 3 years, but you could also do, lots of people actually do a degree in geography or business or history and then diverse into doing a real estate master's. Again, there's another route where you don't have to go to university. JLL also take apprenticeships on, and you can be supported through that, through your degree, through working through JLL. So there's lots of different pathways, and JLL really tries to cater for all of them. But that's how I got into it. I knew I wanted to be a surveyor. So straight after uni, from graduating, I then worked for a big corporate French bank called BNP Paribas, and I went on their graduate scheme. And if you're not aware of graduate schemes, if you don't have older siblings or they haven't been on one, essentially it's lots of the bigger companies do it, and you go on to it's kind of a 1 or 2 year scheme. For the real estate world, it's 2 years to then get qualified at the end, but they plan out those years. So within JLL or all the big real estate companies, you go through each team, and it allows you to have lots of experience through the sector, and to decide which team you'd like to go into once you've qualified. But I know other industries also follow a similar format. And I didn't finish my 2 years there. I then COVID hit, and they decided to make 90% of their graduates redundant, and I was one of them. So it was a really stressful time, but I was lucky enough to get a job in a startup company called Home Views, and this essentially is this is the residential side of real estate, and it was essentially a platform of reviews of new flats and new homes. They were trying to be the TripAdvisor, but for new homes, and loved it there. And this is really where I became interested in sustainability. So as being part of a startup, rather than a big corporate, you have a lot more say in what goes on, and your skill set is really broadened because they have less people to do things. And one of them was that I had a choice of, well, I actually pushed that they had to start asking sustainable questions to the residents so that they could start collecting the data. Because I said, this is going to be huge in the real estate industry, and to be able to start data mapping and being able to see where trends are going, especially with residents, this then allows them to advise developers and investors on what residents want, and it kind of goes on and on from there. So I really sparked that with Home Views, and then I had a 1.5 years there, and then I decided, actually, no, I'm going to use my degree. I want to get chartered, be a chartered surveyor. So I came to JLL, and the reason why I chose JLL is we're really one of the top, if not the top, company in the real estate world for sustainability. We're really pushing it forward. We have lots of initiatives, lots of teams, and my role exactly of what I'm doing now is I sit in the valuation team, and I specifically consult on how sustainability and ESG affects property values. And we're actually the only team in the country that exist. So lots of other real estate companies have sustainability consultants, but we specifically consult on this to big investors or big banks that are looking that have lots and lots of properties. So either hotels or offices or residential flats, and we map out if they are going to get more for their money or less for their money, so something called premium and discounts. And that's essentially what I do. But ESG is in my title, and my next slide, I wanted to really break that down for you, if you haven't heard of it, or if you've heard it more generally and not in the sense of what it means to buildings and real estate. So looking at the E, so this is environmental, so it's energy use and associated emissions that buildings have. So buildings use a lot of energy to keep, for example, to keep just the lights on. So if you think about in your schools how many lights you've got and how much energy that is to have those lights on all day, and then you think about the whole world and how many buildings there are, of how many lights have to be put on every day. And as Alexandra was saying, just a niche asset class of data centers, they use such a large amount of energy. That's the E part of it. And there is lots of initiatives around trying to reduce energy in buildings, and that's part of what my team do as well. Is they'll map out how much energy a specific building uses, and we have data from our sustainability specialists that give them lots of different areas where they could improve their energy, and once they've improved it, we'll say how much more the building is potentially worth because they are more sustainable. Another key aspect to E is biodiversity. So when buildings are built, a lot of the time, if it's not being built in a city, you're knocking down a lot of trees, you're getting rid of ecosystems, and that's essentially what biodiversity is the ecosystems around the world. So buildings have a really major key role to play in this, in terms of allowing those ecosystems to still exist. And actually that brings me really nicely on to G, which is governance, because this is all about laws, so not just in the UK but worldwide, that are being put in place to allow, put it in this essence, for buildings to be more sustainable. And in terms of biodiversity, there has just been a law being enforced called Biodiversity Net Gain, and it's for every new development, they have to have 10% more net gain than there was before. So if you knock down all the trees on a site to build a building, the developer now has to have 10 more trees, or 10% more than before. So you're increasing biodiversity rather than destroying it. So lastly, my last slide, just want to talk a bit about what JLL does, and their kind of key objectives to be more sustainable. An example of how a really big corporate company can do this. We're a global company, so we have a big effect on what our clients do, what all of our employees do. So it's great that we are so focused on it, and there are lots of companies that are doing this as well. So a key objective is growing responsibly for us, and this means when we are growing as a business, so we need more offices, for example, so we have more employees, we need another office. We're ensuring that those offices are sustainable, so we're not just preaching it, we're actually doing it ourselves. So this is things such as solar panels on roofs. You can use wind energy so making sure that your renewable energy to keep all those lights on is coming from a renewable source, not fossil fuels, which is what a lot of buildings use now. And it's also about our clients as well. So we're ensuring that we're advising them in a sustainable method, but also that we try not to avoid, but we try and ensure that our clients, or a good percentage of them, have a sustainable mindset and have sustainable targets. We champion a just and equal society, and I've just picked out two key targets that we have on the bottom right hand corner. So we have a dedicated sustainability pathway for apprentices and graduates. So that's trying to build our sustainable skill set from below to top. And we also have an increased recruitment for graduates from diverse backgrounds. So we're really acknowledging that real estate from nature has been one type of person in society, and it's an industry that genuinely you don't hear about in schools unless your mum or your dad or your uncle is in it. So they're trying to source graduates that come from a more diverse background to ensure that as a company we are more diverse, because essentially when you think about teams, a really good team that works together have different skill sets, and if you're just going for one type of person all the time, you're only going to have one type of skill set. So they're seeing that need and they're trying to increase that. Then inclusion and well-being. So we do lots of initiatives around the globe of trying to ensure that the employees are happy in the offices, and it's an inclusive environment. And then lastly, tackling climate and nature emergency, and that brings me on to WWF. So that's our key charity partner. And I think we have a target for 2026 to raise something like £750,000, and that's just our UK offices. We do lots of things with WWF. So we have bike rides to raise charity. We have they go to lots of community allotments to help out. Wherever our employees can, we try and help our local communities. I think that's all from me. So
Brilliant. Thank you
I'll
so
stop
much.
sharing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Georgina. So a quick question from me before we move on. Again, you've unpacked quite a lot there, and that's brilliant. So you talked about graduate schemes and apprenticeships and like the various twists and turns that, you know, throughout your career journey. So what advice would you give to young people watching who maybe, so just to give some context, our audience is predominantly 14 plus.
Okay.
So, you know, we've got some school leavers, we've got people who are like around, you know, the 18, 19 mark as well. So what if someone's watching and they just have no clue what they want to do with their career? They may want to go to university, they may want to, what advice would you give to someone in that sort of position?
So I think the earlier the better in terms of trying to see where your best skills are. So, you know, if you're a real team player, if you're really sociable, there are certain industries that will be a lot better suited to you. So for me personally, I was always super sporty growing up, loved being part of a team, loved being out and about, and loved making those connections and socializing, which is part of the reason why I chose real estate, because you're out of the office, you're not stuck in the office all day long. It's all about those connections, and presenting and being part of a quite lively industry. That's what really drew me to real estate. So I think if you're starting from school, and I'm sure schools are a lot better, but when I was back at school, there was certain industries that they take you to, you know, and if you're you know, are you going to go to Oxford or Cambridge? If not, then what are you going to do? And try and talk to as many family members and many friends as possible of what different industries they're in, to try and gauge if you would like that, and try and get a week's work experience. It costs them nothing. People are always really open to that, just to see if you enjoy it. But initial step, you know, if you're just 14, what are you good at? What do you like at school? And start to see where you'd like to go from there.
Brilliant. Thank you again, Georgina. So we are going to now move over to Sunny. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really sorry you had those tech issues. We've all been there, and all of us experienced it today. So it's not just you. But yeah, the floor is yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do, and how do you help to protect the planet?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really honoured to be here today and share my story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, Benny, and I'm going to show you a few examples. Hopefully it might inspire you a little bit. But I grew up in the Midlands, and my kind of like my background was I went through schooling, did my GCSEs onto A levels and university. I know the world's changed a lot today. That doesn't seem to be the path, and it's obviously finding the path that's right for you, that's going to get you to where you want to be. Through university, I studied a bachelor's degree in marketing and e-commerce. I kind of knew I wanted to go into marketing. I kind of grew up knowing, you know, I was in the supermarket. I used to love seeing brands, love picking up, you know, packaging that really attracted me, and I'd take those empty boxes home, and I'd create my own little mini little supermarkets. I kind of knew that that's the area I wanted to get into. It's only until, you know, at university, I had great opportunities because of the program I was on. It was an international program. I had an opportunity to do work placement, and I would strongly encourage everyone, you know, finding those work placement opportunities, and they don't always have to come through education. LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool. You know, the amount of people that reach out to me sometimes, and it's just an ask, can you help me? I want to find out a little bit more about this. So going back to what Georgina mentioned, as well as Alexandra, it's finding that thing that really ignites you. What are you really good at? And also finding a way of, you know, coming out of your comfort zone. You know, we're all amongst family members. You always have to talk to people, or you're at school, you'll meet new people, but find ways. There's always things that are going on like, you know, and I often say to people, just watch the news. I know it's a bit doom and gloom, but sometimes just finding that way to strike up that conversation is a way to ask someone, I'd love to find a way. I'm interested, I'm curious. And through my university, I had work placements that were at Madame Tussauds Group, which is a tourist attraction, which everyone probably knows, the waxwork. So I was with the Pearson Group, and, you know, it's a phenomenal year that I spent there. My second year, I was sent to Walt Disney World in Florida, and I learned so much. It's not the world I'm in, but there's so many transferable skills that I learned. I mean, through my schooling, I did a work placement in a flower shop, and I realized I am a chatty person. I love being amongst people. You know, there's so many skills that you pick up along the way. But once I graduated, similar to the story Georgina was mentioning, I did a graduate program at Marks and Spencer's at the head office. And I spent a couple of years there undercovering and learning what did it mean to be part of a marketing team, because Marks and Spencer's had their own internal design studio, their own team. So I was what was classified and still is today client side. I was working for a client, as a client in the client's brand, and we were working with external agencies. I was working on my own personal development, and I was fortunate enough at the time, we are talking about 20 odd years ago, Marks and Spencer's were formulating their corporate social responsibility program, and it was called Plan A. And it was something that I thought, oh, I wouldn't mind getting involved in this. It's got something to do around community and people, and it was everyone was expected to do something voluntary with the business. So I spent that 1 year formulating this CSR Plan A, and I thought, you know, they were just on the cusp of like understanding we as an organization need to start thinking about our community, our people, our environment. So after a couple of years at Marks and Spencer's, I then spent the next 15 years working agency side now, working for big brand agencies, big 5 agencies around UK, USA, Europe, South Africa, working with fantastic brands from one extreme to like chocolate, personal care, pet care, to the other extreme, like nicotine, diamonds, completely off the scale. And you're understanding this world of all these brands and how they're creating these stories. And the most pivotal part for me was one of the agencies I worked with, our client was Unilever. And Unilever, for anyone who don't know them, they produce, if you actually open up a lot of your kitchen cupboard, you'll probably see a lot of those products in there. It's household products like Cif, Domestos, Persil, Surf, beauty from Dove, to food like Cornetto, Magnum, Knorr, you name it, they've got their hands somewhere in that pie. And one of the biggest things with Unilever, the CEO, and this is very early 2000, Paul Polman, realized he had this great ambition that actually we need to demonstrate how business can be a force for good. How can we show people that we're operating in this global world and we can actually have a positive impact, rather than taking and creating a negative impact in communities, overutilizing certain ingredients in our food, or overusing water in most of their products. 95% products contain way too much water. He revolutionized the business. And one of the key things I thought was fantastic was to find out, do we have the right people in our business? And there's this Japanese philosophy called Ikigai, and it's all about finding your purpose. And Paul Polman, with some consultancy companies, worked together, putting this piece together about, let's find if we have the right people. Are they purpose driven? Are these the people that genuinely wake up every day and think to themselves, my purpose in this world is to create better, and I'm going to do this by X, Y, Z. So firstly, by having the right people in the business, they turned it inside out. They They went through the entire business operations, all the brands and products. They all had to have a genuine impact in terms of what is it going to do to help advance communities, how is it going to help restore the planet, and how are we going to give back. And that for me was amazing. We were the lead agency that was working on a lot of personal care, food, home care. That piece was pivotal in terms of it changed the industry. Unilever were very cutting edge in terms of we need to find ways that purpose is what's going to drive us. And inevitably today, brands and organizations are now realizing we need to have a genuine purpose, that our audiences are attracted towards us because it demonstrates how we're being responsible. And therefore, from a financial point, the profits automatically come. So during that process, Paul Polman decided to move on to work on net zero. I felt like, oh gosh, I'm rather empty now because the organizations we're working with, the other brands, weren't quite at the cusp of this. So it was just at the height of COVID, I decided, and this is just before COVID arrived, I just happened to have decided literally a week before, I'm going to create my own consultancy, because part of the challenge of working in the agencies, there were challenges within the agency model that didn't really, the leadership for women, inspiring them and getting them to a particular level where you think you're changing the world, you are actually leading and informing. And I thought, I'm actually going to leave and create something of my own. And then a week later, COVID happened, which didn't stop me, because I thought 2 weeks later, COVID will disappear. Unbeknown, it was going to go on for 2 years. But dare I say it, I think it's finding that moment, and it took me a while, you know, and it's not something I kind of woke up one day and realized this is what I want to do. It was because of the impact or the involvement I was privy to have with Unilever, and it took a time after to realize actually there's a lot that resonates with personal values. So when you go back to about what is it that I'm looking that I want to do, how can I create that change? And don't quite have to be, oh, it's got to be something of a great magnitude, I'm going to change the world, because collectively, if we all make that one little change, it also makes itself to all of us coming together to create a bigger impact in the world. So I set up Defy Brands thinking, firstly, this is going to be an agency that is genuinely going to help to create a difference out there. So how can we work with businesses or brands that are going to change and restore the environment? How are we going to work with brands or businesses that are going to advance society? There's so many underrepresented communities out there. There are so many people whose needs haven't been met. So that's the premises of what Defy does, about how do we create these businesses that are going to be responsible. So I'm going to show you some examples of the work and how we're now, this is kind of going into 2.0. Where's your share screen? Let me see if I can do this. There we go. So some of the brands that we've been privy to work with, a lot in the tech space, in terms of the work or the services we provide around as a branding consultancy. We work around branding impact. So that could be from working with food brands. One of the biggest brands that we were privy to work with is Redefine Meat. Imagine a company that's realized, actually, if we 3D print plants and create meat, so sensorially it's exactly like eating animal meat, but it's actually made out of 5 plants. It's natural, but the process is using really smart robots and intelligent machine learning and AI. We can recreate meat. We can actually restore and tread lightly in the environment. So we're able to work with Redefine Meat. Similarly with Callista, there are precision fermentation. The founder realized there's a microbiome that exists in a spa in Bath, and that actually they could take that microbiome that's lived in such extreme heat and for such longevity, take it back into a lab, understand its DNA, replicate it, and then create fermented protein at such a mass scale. Therefore, you're not having to use any water or rely on any plants. Granted, it's all created in a lab, but it is actually so much more better for the environment. Allied Green, very similar, this woman-owned business in Indonesia. She was in her 20s, realizing actually with all the climate change that's happening right now, the world has to adapt. And she realized if she didn't stay behind to help local farmers, women farmers, disabled farmers realize how to adapt and manage their land much more resiliently, there'd be nothing left. And right now there's about 15,000 farmers that are being supported, learning how to create regenerative crops and creating produce, and therefore building and creating a sustainable community for future generations. So we've been privy enough to work with these brands to help to tell their stories, to think a bit about how do they reach out to their communities and, you know, communicate their impact. How do they create opportunities working with government organizations? How can they raise capital to elevate their impact and reach around the world, all the way through to communication, working with City of London. They do a fantastic amount of work for their community, through to the people that they support. They've got such vast stakeholders, and we've been responsible for helping them with, as Georgina mentioned earlier, ESG, communicating what it is that they're doing from an environmental point, their social and their governance, how they being a responsible business. We've been able to go in, do some measures, working with a third party, Ernest Young, to do some measurements and start creating that communication through whether it's a set of communication guides, procurement guides, helping businesses to really understand what it is that how City are being much more mindful. BeWise is a great example from America. These guys have created a AI robotic beehive. Now this is super smart. It means no humans are needed to interrupt what bees necessarily do in terms of creating and pollinating honey, but these robotic hives are so smart. They can understand what's changing in the climate, from to weather to understanding how bees are behaving, and it can adapt. I mean, if you think about how much of our food is reliant on bees, over 70% of crops are reliant on bees. This is smart technology that is securing our food scarcity. That's what's happening. And lastly, a lovely initiative from an advocacy network group that are trying to build Bangladesh's first eco school, being able to work around how we can reach new corporate sponsors, start fundraising through a lot of the initiatives that we're doing. So we've been privy to work with a number of brands across around the world to try and find ways that they can communicate their impact, even right through to advocacy network groups. In Netherlands, trying to launch an inaugural event that talks about how suppliers, diverse suppliers like myself, find it really difficult to get our foot in the door to finding those corporate opportunities. So it's been a 3-year journey, and it's going fantastically well. What we're working on right now is finding ways that, because we're a social enterprise, how can we support a future generation of young girls in particular? These are the girls that are particularly bright-minded, who probably have some of the best skills out there to create some fantastic ideas that can solve some of the pressing challenges. So we are working with our alumni university, Westminster. We have a couple of corporate sponsors that have come on board, as well as social enterprise, and we're just in the midst of creating the program, and we hope to launch this next year, targeting girls across the UK from the age of 15. So I'm hoping that my path has demonstrated that it's taken me a while to realize where my key strengths play. And I found those opportunities. I myself as well, I use a lot on LinkedIn, reaching out to people. And quite often it's that soft approach that I'm just looking to learn. I just want to get some access, or where do I get, you know, who's the right person to speak to? But there's lots of opportunities within your networks and reaching out to people that have perhaps, you know, alumni from your own school that may be able to help you, put you in touch into different kind of like areas you're looking to explore. But I hope this helps.
I think that was so helpful. Thank you so much, Sunny. So you actually answered a question that I had in mind. My question was going to be to all of you, in fact, what's the most challenging part of your role? And you touched, and I think, Alex, it was yourself, and you both kind of mentioned about how it's predominantly a male-dominated kind of sector, and you know, we're looking to get more girls and women and females into this sector. So that's definitely a challenge that you both explained and described. What other challenges do you face when trying to protect the environment, and what are you doing to overcome those like daily challenges doesn't have to be as big as what you've mentioned about the female male sort of balance, but it could be an everyday challenge that you're experiencing in the world of work. And how do you overcome those challenges? And we'll just start off with Sunny, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges sometimes we find is people are, I think it's the education part, it's the unknown, and therefore it's slightly daunting, because I think often, there's things that are portrayed on the television. Sometimes there's some fantastic movies that are out there, but they're so far-fetched, and it does scare people that, gosh, is this really happening? And you have those on the other end of the spectrum that just think the world's absolutely fine. So I think it's finding the right balance and finding ways. It's conversational, it's human, and you can talk to people. And we often find, some of the brands, we're fortunate, we work with fantastic startups, and these startups really are the ones that are created because they're born because they realize there's a purpose, there's something they need to kind of, restore or deliver as an unmet need. A lot of the brands that are so much further down the kind of heritage, historical, been around many years, it's challenging for them to overturn an entire industry, an entire organization, to find ways that they can become responsible. But I often think it's just taking small steps. Everything is a small step. You don't need to jump in and create this formidable, a sustainable living plan like Unilever did. But it's some of those challenges are where people are, quite daunted about what is happening out there, and they'd rather somewhat either shy away from it or bury their heads.
And I think having these kinds of conversations are so important, like around Earth Day, and kind of bringing that awareness. And part of the Sustainable Futures project is all about like the 3 A's, we call it, which is aspire and awareness and access, which is what we're hoping to do today. We want to raise awareness. We want to aspire people to consider these career options and then give access. So already all 3 of you have mentioned your LinkedIn, and that you're active on LinkedIn, and that you don't actually mind connecting and reaching out to people and them to reach out to you. So that's opening up access already. So that's wonderful. Thank you. So Alex, what about yourself? What's one of the challenges that you face daily or weekly in your role, and what are you doing to overcome it?
I guess from a personal perspective, it's just that, like I said before, I touched on it briefly, but I kind of fell into this role, and I didn't go and get a degree, and I don't have any kind of technical qualifications. And I think because of that, I have held myself back from going after opportunities in the past, because I've looked at a job description and it says, as a bare minimum, you need a degree. And I've gone, okay, never mind. Even though if I took it apart and took a moment to look at it and went, actually, I can do all of these things that it's asking for in the actual day-to-day role. And I could actually do a very good job at that role. So kind of held myself back in a way. And I think the access thing that you spoke about there, Neelam, is really key for me. I do come from one of those businesses that you mentioned where, it's 75 years old or something, JLL. It's a great big corporation. We've got something like 90,000 people across the globe working here. It's a big business, and that in itself is quite a difficult thing, because you then have to change things that are really set in stone. Depending on your level within the business, it can be quite difficult to get that traction, to get in front of the right people that actually can make those changes, and open up that access to other people. So I think that for me is the kind of struggle. But one thing that is good is coming into it from this perspective, where I don't have the same background as some of the senior leadership people. When I'm going in there and meeting them, and they're seeing me and the work that I'm doing, they're going, hold on a minute. This, we can look at other people from different backgrounds, from more diverse backgrounds. I come from South East London. I grew up in quite a poor neighbourhood, quite a deprived area, and they're going, well, what do people like you need, Alex, to come and work for a company like us? And it's opening up that access, which is going to take time. And I think but the fact that it is happening at all is a great thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Sometimes we do doubt our ability, but actually the thing that you think you may be lacking in could actually give you that edge. And it could be you could be filling that gap that you don't know necessarily that you are filling that gap, and that you're capable of filling that gap. So it can also be a confidence thing, and just kind of putting yourself out there and getting yourself out of your comfort zone. I think for me personally, in my career, I know that that's been really beneficial, just kind of putting yourself out there. I remember being really, really shy at school, and now like I'm hosting presentations, and I've been a teacher in the past where I've had to deliver assemblies, and it is just taking that step and then taking another step and continuing with that. So that's great advice. And Georgina, what about you? A challenge, and how are you overcoming your challenge?
I've got one personal, and then I mean there's so many, right? I think that's a key thing. Like in work and in life, there's always challenges that you're trying to overcome. And I think personally within my role, and something that actually, you know, on my CV, I'd say is my strength is communication. But this role is really challenging because we're a new team. So instead of lots of, like Alexandra was saying, lots of the teams have really, really set ways of doing things because they're so old, and real estate's such an old industry. My team's so new that we're creating new, different ways of doing processes and different ways that we're advising clients. And part of it is that we're talking to loads of all our other teams, and not just in the UK, globally. So I'm talking to so many, and it's pushing my communication skills, which is great, but it's such a hard skill, I'd say, to really nail. I appreciate people now that are in, you know, PR and are constantly talking to different people every day, because it's really tricky to keep attached when you not just one person, you're talking to 10 in a day. So that's definitely a challenge that I found that necessarily I would have said I'm quite strong at. And then business wise, I actually think it's probably the opposite of what Sunny was saying for real estate, is there's too much information out there. So for real estate, there is so many different legislations and